Birds are in the sky.
What makes a warrior is how they see challenges and adversity as opportunities. Warriors grow, prepare, and prevail through their crucibles. Whether you're active duty, retired, or veteran, whether your battlefield is in entrepreneurship, business, or just climbing life's ladder, you'll gain some of what makes a warrior a warrior. Insight. Lessons of grit, adaptability, and the warrior's spirit will inspire you to smash through anything that stands in the way of your mission. Buckle your seatbelt as U.S. Marine veteran and international best-selling author Zachary Green interviews fellow warriors and share how they conquered their crucibles.
Yes, sir. We're gonna smoke them.
All right, welcome Warrior's Voice. I'm very excited today. We have a true warrior on the show with us today. My partner, Colonel Rico Player, and her served together. Talk about an incredible background, an incredible diversity of experience, talent. But the one thing is she is a badass warrior. So with that, I'd like to introduce Marine veteran, news reporter, and Lieutenant Commander Amy Forsythe. Amy, thank you so much for joining us today.
I think it's so great to be with you and connect after seeing all the great things that you're doing. Wonderful to be with you.
Oh, we appreciate it. So let's just jump right into it. Tell us where you grew up. Tell us about your childhood and why in the world would you ever want to join the Marine Corps?
Well, I actually was born and raised in Santa Rosa, California, which is north of San Francisco by about an hour or so. And, I tell the stories that I went to Catholic school. I went to an all-girls Catholic school. I wore a uniform every day and I went to school. I did what the nuns told me to do. So joining the military was not that big of a stretch for me. Go to work, wear a uniform, do what the NCOs tell me to do. But I was always drawn to service in some way. And so when I actually my parents would take me to the Fleet Week in San Francisco, and believe it or not, those impressions as a young kid, a teenager, left a really lasting mark on me in San Francisco. And so when I found out that women could actually serve in the Marines, I said, you can do that too. I said I could. Well, sign me up. So I joined the Marines at the old age of 22, actually. So wonderful step off to a great career as a combat photographer, combat correspondent, military journalist. And I've just been blessed with so many great assignments. So that was, I was drawn to that through, I grew up in the 80s on movies like Platoon and A Few Good Men, and, just some of the Top Gun, some of those other movies that really inspired that generation to serve.
Excellent. Well, my grandparents lived in Oakmont and Santa Rosa, and we'll have to talk about your favorite wineries here maybe on the next episode. Now, did you start out as an enlisted? Is that right?
I did. So I joined as an enlisted member. I hadn't finished my college or anything. I just sort of, I went to college, I was working, and I always wanted to join the Marines. My parents said, just try to go to school first. If you don't like it, then you can join. And so that's why I delayed a few years. But joining later after Desert Storm had just finished, I was so inspired and moved that I joined right after that, and really just hit these waves of awesome deployments and experiences that, I couldn't imagine it going in another way. So it'll be 30 years this come February, of 30 years since I first stepped on the yellow footprints. And luckily I've seen so many changes during my career, obviously so many changes for women in particular, but I live here in Oceanside, California, and currently work at Camp Pendleton as a civilian, but I was stationed at Camp Pendleton in those early days. And so I've just seen so many great changes. But my first duty station though was Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where I was working at the broadcasting center, doing reporting on the radio and television during the 90s. So that was a great introduction to video production, radio production, and telling stories about our service members.
Well, let's jump into one of those stories right now. Here, this Girl grows up in the beautiful Santa Rosa area, and all of a sudden you're on a plane and you wake up and you're down here in South Carolina, staying on the yellow footprints at Paris Island with your whole world getting ready to turn upside down. Talk us through what recruit training was like for you.
Well, I didn't really know what to expect. I really had to chase my recruiters down to join the Marines, believe it or not. But once I got there, I was a little nervous, but for me, physically, the physical work and the hikes and the early mornings, that wasn't really too strenuous for me. I felt that it was manageable, but I met some of my greatest friends to date in boot camp. And so, obviously it was all women. We had women drill instructors who scared the living daylights out of me. Of course, they were doing their job properly. So 3 months flew by. It was a big blur, really, but I learned, obviously instilled the core values and really got the best and the most training out of that has lasted a lifetime. And so we all can remember our drill instructors, they made such a lasting impression on us. So it was a good experience for me. I was glad to leave, and a sense of accomplishment that will stay with me forever. I like it, like all Marines, right? That transformation is forever. And so I was just a very proud moment when people thought, when they told back in my hometown, I'm like, I'm joining the Marines. There's like, no way. Oh, okay. Good luck with that. Right. Because they thought I was like a Barbie doll, whatever. They're like, not really ready for the Marine Corps. Right. So it was just such a out of the blue thing for a lot of my friends. Are like, you're doing what? So I made it through boot camp, no problems. It was exhilarating, really, and exciting, and what's to come and the opportunities that were in front of me.
What were some of those intangibles that you encountered at boot camp that have stuck with you today and now all these years later?
Well, I love the spirit of cooperation, and there was no mission that was too hard or too difficult. And when people work together, you can accomplish anything. And so that was really the best part of what I got away from that. And my bunkmate and I are still friends today from boot camp. And so just those lasting friendships that you can't make anywhere else, that stay with you. And so, of course, the spirit of the Marine Corps, the legacy, I think the Marine Corps does its initial training better than any other organization, any other military branch. And so the training of the Marine Corps history, the indoctrination part of the legacy is second to none. And so I just love that historical vintage Marine Corps legacy. And then the leadership traits that we all learn that will stay with you for your lifetime.
Absolutely.
General orders, JJ did tie buckle, all the things that go into training Marines. And then those Marines can go on and do great things. And so it's just a great foundation for everyone who goes through boot camp.
Very well said. And it's amazing. It's just a few months out of your entire life, but yet it's just so seared in your mind and in your heart. And for me, I agree with you. It was the difference. I think the big difference, besides the physicality, is the traditions and the history. I don't think a lot of the other branches have that. And that's why Marines have such incredible esprit de corps and connection with each other, because of the unbelievable thread that has been threaded through our history and the connection that we all have to our ancestors before us and those that are now coming up, the new Marines that are coming out there every week.
It does. And now that I've transitioned out of the Marine Corps, it's that connection that you have from the very early days of your career. And so that will stay with. So even as a veteran, there's still that connection to other Marines. And so it's just a lifetime, like being a part of a family. So even though it's a distant family, but the network, the strong Marine Corps network is alive and well in circles for those out there looking to reaffiliate or, be a part of a group, getting back to those Marine Corps roots. And you can find Marines in any city in America to reconnect with if you're looking for that.
It's always easy to tell them because they've got a bumper sticker on their car or they're flying the Marine colors or something along those lines. So, Guantanamo, you're done at Gitmo. Talk us through what happened after that then.
Well, when I first got orders there, the movie A Few Good Men had just come out. So I really didn't know what to expect. What have I gotten myself into? But I got orders to work at the Navy Broadcasting Center there, where I was doing radio and television reporting. And then just a few months into my assignment there, a year-long assignment, you may recall when Cubans and Haitians started to flood the waters and started to come to America, where it was a mass exodus from Haiti. There was a coup. Jean-Bertrand Aristide was the president, and many Haitians tried to come to America. Same with the Cubans. Well, southern Florida was getting flooded with refugees, and so what they decided to do is a humanitarian crisis. They picked everyone up at sea and brought them to the base, and this was
I remember that. Yeah.
1994. Yes, so we turned the golf course, the football fields, the high schools, the housing units into basically a refugee tent city and a camp. A base that was designed for about 4,000 people turned into 60,000 people on Guantanamo Bay, the Navy base at Guantanamo Bay. And so my job was to cover the stories, talk to the families, try to get sense of what was going on. So it really turned into a full-on joint task force. And I was there, just happened to be stationed there. So it was just a really great experience to learn how a joint task force is formed. I got to interview some of our most senior leaders in the Marine Corps and the Navy. Congressional delegations were visiting to look at the tent camp cities. So here I was, Lance Corporal Forsythe, getting to interview the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Chief of Naval Operations, Congressman. At such an early age, that really made an impression on me on just how we not only are trained to support combat operations, but humanitarian crisis as well.
That's great. Wow. Unbelievable experience for anybody, especially your first duty assignment and as a E3. That's awesome. So take us through what happened there. Did you have a second tour then with the Marine Corps?
Well, so after I did my tour, my 1-year tour there, I learned so many great lessons and operationally minded, really came to Camp Pendleton, excuse me, where I worked as a combat correspondent, worked at the Scout newspaper. For those people who remember the Scout newspaper at Camp Pendleton, a circulation of about 50,000 really. So it was a great way to cut my teeth in newspaper and covering stories all around the base, worked on a lot of community relations engagements, fielding queries and community relations events to tour the base or provide color details and pull the flag over the Super Bowl one year and do some reporting and engaging with the media in our local areas. So covered a lot of ground all the way from, say, Yuma, Arizona to Bridgeport, California, and everywhere in between. So I worked there for really the duration of my career, about 5 years or so. Before I got out, exited active duty, but stayed in the reserve. So just a tremendous experience. I learned all the history of Camp Pendleton and every training range there is on the base. I've been to it and taken pictures, interviewed literally thousands of people throughout the course of my career. So really just a great way to really learn the Marine Corps ins and outs and see the generations of people coming through, equipment changes, policy changes, and then I left active duty in 2000.
Gotcha. So you're out in 2000, and I believe you then started pursuing a career in broadcast journalism. Is that right?
That's correct. So I left active duty so I could really finish school. So I was sort of piecemealing my bachelor's degree together the hard way. Before, back then, they didn't have online courses, so I'd have to take classes at night or on the weekends, and only the way to finish your bachelor's degree was to attend school during the daytime. So I chose to leave, use my GI Bill. I went to Cal State San Marcos, and my major was in communications. So I stayed in the area in Oceanside, California, and was able to finish my degree and stay in the reserve. So I affiliated with a reserve unit, a civil affairs unit at Camp Pendleton, got the civil affairs MOS, and I was working as a reporter locally for a local TV station. So I was juggling school, work, reserves all at the same time. And then 9/11 happened. Of course, this changed the trajectory of everything for a lot of people, myself included. So once 9/11 happened, I knew I was going to get mobilized. And so I had to put my studies on hold. And sure enough, I got mobilized to deploy to Afghanistan in 2002. So I went and supported a civil affairs task force for the Army, but I'd already had the civil affairs MOS, or the Marine Corps, is an emerging field that the Marine Corps was slowly adopting. And luckily I had already taken the classes, got the MOS. So I inserted with an Army unit in Kabul in Afghanistan, really before the Iraq war even kicked off. So I got a taste of what that was like in Afghanistan. So that was great. I mean, it was a great experience working in a joint environment, out every day, working and covering stories of reconstruction and how we were helping the Afghans really before the height of combat operations really was starting slowly to take off there in Afghanistan.
Do you have any good stories that reach out at you, or anything you'd like to share from that time?
Well, during those early days, we were kind of believing that we could have an effect there. And, we wanted with all our heart felt like we were making a difference for the Afghan people, and that they were receptive to what we were trying to provide them. And I think back to those early days where they hadn't really been exposed to people in the Western world, or women who were uncovered. And so when they saw me, blonde hair, fair skin, wearing a uniform, carrying a weapon and a camera, they had never seen this before. So these were some of the first exposures for them to see people that were different from them. And so the response on the look on their face was just, they were just startled or in disbelief of what they were seeing when they would see someone like me. So I got to see it really from the very beginning, and then towards the tail end in Afghanistan, with having served 2 more tours in Afghanistan. So it really came full circle for me of just a constant steady state of deployment through the years.
So you mentioned something I think that is absolutely key and hallmark to warriors, and that is you use the word purpose, and how the mission over there was a sense of purpose. You had multiple tours over there. You got to see some great things. You got to see some pretty horrible stuff too. Talk me through what you feel that you accomplished, and specifically under the light of a combat correspondent in civil affairs, because at the end of the day, you're writing the history. If it happens and no one knows about it, then nobody knows about it. It didn't really happen. But having the opportunity in a time like that, where it was so much about the hearts and minds, civil affairs was just absolutely critical. So talk to us a little about your purpose and the legacy that you and your teammates left behind during all that time you spent in country.
Well, my first tour was we were just sort of building the plane as we were flying, more or less. So the Civil Affairs Task Force was comprised really of a lot of reservists, Army reservists, because they didn't really have a full-time active duty need for this. And so normally civil affairs is comprised of experts in their field, veterinarians, doctors, engineers. And so many of the Army soldiers that I worked with were all coming from all over the country and mobilized to go support this. And they had to put their practices on hold, veterinarian clinics, doctors, engineers. And so they were risking everything to come and support this mission in Afghanistan in the early days, where people weren't jaded, or they hadn't really developed a distrust of the government yet. And so we were putting our heart and souls into into the mission. And so really, I just met some of the most incredible people that I'm still friends with today, and just watched their progress through their careers, and how that really had a turning effect on them as being, being ready to be called up for service, did what they could, did everything that was asked of them. And so the stories that I wrote about them, actually, and about the reconstruction and the progress that we were making, the schools that we were building, I see a lot of times that in academic reports and other historical research projects, people are referencing the stories that I wrote. And so little did I know at that time, what I was just cranking out stories just because that was like the norm. That was what I was expected. Hopefully somebody would have found it useful, but I never could have imagined that they would be used in academic or research purposes 20 years later. And so every once in a while, I'll see an article that pops up that they reference the NATO command standing up, or different parts of the reconstruction that we were doing in those early days in 2002 and 2003. So that feels very rewarding out there. So now everyone wants to talk about information space and the information out there, and archiving, and what people are saying. But if for those out there who are working in the information space, know that everything that you're writing will be a historical record for a future generation, and looking at it as such. And so that's the advice that I give to, junior people, just the next generation of storytellers in our military, is that their work is so important. And so commanders are now learning how to prioritize that documentation piece, because it will be used for a future generation.
Well, and I mean, a perfect example is some of those things like Abu Ghraib and some of those other areas where the pen truly is mightier than the sword. It wasn't what happened with the combat activities. It was, now that we have this instant dissemination of information, the incredible, powerful tool that can play now. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we are in the information age now, and that is, a lot of times wars are won and lost because of that. And I think you're starting to see that a lot over with the modern day hostilities over in Ukraine right now, the absolute vitally importance of, that historical record that you talked about.
Definitely. And you mentioned Abu Ghraib. I use that as a teaching point when I was an instructor at the Defense Information School, where all military journalists go to school, is that when people are careless about the photos they're taking, or and now posting to social media, if troops are careless with that information, it could create a hostile situation, and now putting other troops at risk. And so mitigating those risks and training and educating people about, and we've had several cases where troops are careless with their images and their words and posted on social media, where now you're creating a hostile environment, putting others at risk, that being one of them. And so not only do public affairs military journalists or communication strategy experts teach this to their troops, but they're also advising people on ways to what to avoid, but also leveraging influencers too, which is now a hot topic for those still on active duty, of leveraging their passion for serving and being able to show just how much they really love the service. There's so many great influencers out there, not in public affairs or not in comstrat fields, that are doing really great work, who are influencing the next generation to join the military or continue serving. So I love seeing those influencers out there. They're doing such great work.
I agree. For those of us that are listening to the podcast and not watching it, you have something over your left shoulder. Would you mind telling us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so thanks. So in all of my reporting through the years, I never dreamed in a million years that I would end up publishing a book, but I just published this book called Heroes Live Here, a tribute to Camp Pendleton Marine since 9/11. And when I got stationed back here at Camp Pendleton for my job, I'd lived overseas in Guam for the last 5 years and came back to Camp Pendleton. I noticed that there's been many memorials and tributes placed around the base for the Marines serving during the Iraq and Afghanistan operations. And I said, let me take some photos of this. Maybe I can share with Gold Star families or fellow Marines who had served at Camp Pendleton through the years and never had a chance to come back to see the actual memorials. And that led me to putting all of these tributes together in a book called Heroes Live Here, and just talking about some of the history under the 1st Marine Division, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, where really above all else, they've laid so much treasure in Iraq and Afghanistan because that was their area of operation. So, for example, you can see some of these tributes from 1st Marines there in the book. And so I've compiled it into 200 pages of backstory and understanding about really the sacrifices of those stationed at Camp Pendleton. You can see here a picture of the Marines that we lost last year in August. The Marines that were killed at the Kabul airport were based at Camp Pendleton. And so as I was putting the finishing touches on the book, I said, I have to include them. Those 10 Marines, 1 sailor who were killed, they were based right here at Camp Pendleton. And so their stories are in this book. But it was really just a natural compilation of items that and contributions from other people, from other Marines who served. And I wanted to make sure that they could add their stories about being stationed at Camp Pendleton and the important aspect of the training areas that we have here. And so here's a wall of honor where I highlight some of the Marines you might recognize their names: Travis Mannion, Douglas Zembiak, Megan McClung, Joseph Ellis, Sergeant Major, Robert Cottle, Sergeant Major, Chance Phelps, and a movie was based on
One of the
Taking
most
Chance.
breathtaking movies I've ever seen. I was so deeply affected by that movie. It was so beautifully done. Not a lot of people know about it, but if you get a chance, I believe it's HBO film. Is that right?
That's correct. Starring Kevin Bacon.
And it is, if you want to see how the Marine Corps and the military honors are fallen, watch this movie, because we talk a lot about what happens at the funeral, but you never really see the continuity that happens from the point of the death to the point that they're finally put at peace. So.
It was such a beautiful tribute movie. And so when I researched some of the book, learning more about Chance Phelps, his father was a Marine Vietnam veteran and served also. And he is actually the sculptor of a structure that they placed on Camp Pendleton, where the No Man Left Behind statue. And so just all of these chance connections. So if you remember Sergeant Major First Sergeant Brad Castle, who was stationed at Camp Pendleton, and then a bronze statue is placed at the Wounded Warrior Center, but he is the one who sculpted that. Chance Phelps' father sculpted that structure and placed one at Camp Lejeune and one at Camp Pendleton at the Wounded Warrior Complex.
I just wish they would have had an image of him giving the 1 finger salute to the bad guys instead of that one there. But I guess that wouldn't pass the your side of the clearance that has to go through to approve that.
Yeah, so it's writing a book. Everyone has a story in them. I truly believe that. So your struggles and your story can be someone else's survival guide. And so I hope that the book Heroes Live Here brings some comfort and closure to those Marines and their families who have served here at Camp Pendleton, especially, but all around, wherever the Marine Corps sends you. And we say home is wherever the Marine Corps sends you, whether it's Camp Pendleton, Camp Lejeune, Barstow, Hawaii even. So there's some great duty stations out there, but Camp Pendleton is a special one. I talk about the history of Camp Pendleton and the years of this year marks the 80th anniversary of Camp Pendleton, but Camp Pendleton has been home to our premier warfighting force, even World War II, Korea, Vietnam, of course, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then the last 20 years of a constant rotation of troops in the communities surrounding here have just been phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ma'am, thank you so much for your time today. Any other last parting words, any other stories, anything you'd like to share with us before we conclude here?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share my slice of the Marine Corps, my experience. I've had the great fortune of meeting and serving with so many people, but I did definitely want to dedicate this episode to a special Marine that a lot of people know about, Major Megan McClung, who served as a public affairs officer, and we served together in Iraq in 2006, and she was killed by an IED in 2006 in Ramadi, Iraq. And so there's a lot of tributes to her out there, but a lot of people don't know that what the sacrifices of women, especially, they still believe that women, don't go to the front lines or don't get out there, but all Marines willing to risk it all, no matter your MOS, no matter your gender, no matter how long you've been in war and combat. What we've learned from Iraq and Afghanistan doesn't know gender, doesn't know rank, doesn't know MOS. And so for your listeners out there, to remember that, women have risked it all and served with great dignity, patience, and diligence, and appreciate the opportunity to share that.
No, we appreciate it. And for those of you that remember that name, Colonel Player, Rico Player, the co-founder of this podcast, actually served with Amy and Megan over there. So there was quite a bit of connection there with all of them. Amy, how can we get a hold of your book? How can we buy a copy of that if we're interested?
Well, thank you. I definitely encourage people to go to the website called Heroes Live Here. And you can check out there's some free downloadables from my graphic designer, who was a Marine veteran who created some amazing graphics here, but heroeslivehere.com. But I would definitely love to connect with people on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and maybe share your stories of your service. I'd love to connect and learn more about other people's experiences out there. And once a Marine, always a Marine. So just remember that no one can take that away from you, no matter what you do. And you go on to do other things in life. Like myself, I left the Marines and transitioned over to the Navy Reserves, but no one can take that away from you. So I appreciate the opportunity to share some of that history and legacy with you and your audience out there.
Well, ma'am, thank you so much. It was a great chat today. And I'm going to ask you to help conclude our episode, as we always do, with a knife hand and the word Semper Fidelis. So I'll count us down 3, 2, 1, and then we'll go ahead and do it. Ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Semper
Semper Fidelis.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Birds are in the sky.
What makes a warrior is how they see challenges and adversity as opportunities. Warriors grow, prepare, and prevail through their crucibles. Whether you're active duty, retired, or veteran, whether your battlefield is in entrepreneurship, business, or just climbing life's ladder, you'll gain some of what makes a warrior a warrior. Insight. Lessons of grit, adaptability, and the warrior's spirit will inspire you to smash through anything that stands in the way of your mission. Buckle your seatbelt as U.S. Marine veteran and international best-selling author Zachary Green interviews fellow warriors and share how they conquered their crucibles.
Yes, sir. We're going to